Hello, guys. Can you hear me fine? Yep. Great. So, welcome. This talk is called Beyond the Cron Job, Eliminating Single Points of Failure. Well, thank you for the organizers for having me the chance to speak here. My name is Facu Spagnuolo. I'm one of the co-founders and CTO at Mimic. We've been working in this space doing automation for 4 years now. I've been in this space for a long time. I started as a security researcher and engineer at OpenSeven in 2017, and then I contributed to many different projects like Balancer, Aragon, The Graph, and 4 years ago we started Mimic. Let's begin with the talk. So this week, in one of the panels, I was asked if users actually cared about decentralization. If there was actually something that the users were willing to pay for or to suffer for, if they do actually care. Not sure if you know this guy, but Mariano Conde is one of my closest friends here in Argentina, and in one of his DevCon talks, he said that decentralization doesn't matter until it matters, which is actually right. And the answer that I gave to the question was that, in my opinion, it's somehow a trade-off. Of course, you are always dealing between this trade-off between user experience and security. I remember back in the days where, like around those ICOs in 2017, like everyone was building a project on top of a blockchain. They were basically trying to decentralize everything. I remember like huge architectures of smart contracts in order to implement this type of projects, and it was kind of a nightmare. I remember also like dealing with UIs being served through IPFS, which was like a really bad experience. I think we move on somehow, and this is not happening nowadays, but the lemma is still the same, like not your keys, not your crypto. And probably this is something that you may not think since day one, or maybe you will not implement since day one. But at some point, it must be part of the roadmap. You need to be prepared ahead of time to make sure when you're gonna actually to commit to it and how you're going to implement it. Also, it's not just for the users. It's not for them to be secure or safe. I think it's also for us, for the builders. In my opinion, like thinking about decentralization is a way to sleep at night. Thinking about not having custody of my users' funds, it's something that it keeps me in a better place, I think. As we've seen, probably we're all aware that hacks these days are not all about the smart contract vulnerabilities. We've been seeing like phishing, DNS hijacking, like social engineering, many different things that are going on these days that are not just about smart contracts being hacked. The thing is, I've been doing a little bit of research, and the thing is that many projects that I think, they still rely on privileged keys, right? I mean, at some point, there are keys that are stored somewhere that somehow got leaked or stolen, whatever, and these projects got hacked. We've seen like custom scripts trying to run like periodic transactions in order to keep this project up and running. Could be like validators or rebalancing for DeFi projects, something like that. And all of these require, of course, keys stored somewhere in order to execute those transactions. Moreover, multi-sigs or hardware wallets are not always used, even though we think this should be something like the common base, but it's not what happens. And this is something that we've been thinking a lot at Mimic. So the idea today is to explore this concept about what we call, or internally we call about this trustless execution. That I think it's something interesting that we find for ourselves, and it should be something that I think the rest of the projects could also use and might help avoiding some of these hacks. First of all, what do I mean with trustless execution? Basically, allowing anyone to execute code. So every time we think about the solution, sometimes, it's trivial to think, okay, this smart contract can be owned by an account, an EOA or multisig, whatever, and we permission all our functions, and that's it. But maybe we can go one step further and start thinking, is there a way that we can execute this code in a trustless way or a permissionless way? Like anyone can execute this code. Is there a way, of course, if we do that, we might rely on signatures. So is there a way that I can sign only once and execute multiple times? Another great concept is what we call on-chain safeguards. This is basically like the ultimate safety net, right, that we have. Even though if our keys are exposed somehow, is there like an ultimate layer of security that may prevent things to go wrong? Of course, the goal at the end of the day is not to expose the keys. So let's revisit some real hacks for reference to bear in mind what I'm speaking of. Wintermute, not sure, this was a couple of years ago, if you remember, but basically Wintermute was an algorithmic market-making company that they basically relied on a smart contract that was owned by an EOA. This EOA was basically generated, it was a vanity address that was generated with profanity. Profanity back then had like a security issue that basically was generating the addresses with 32 words seeds. Basically, this EOA was, the private key was brute forced, and this ended up on a 160 million loss for the company. So again, in this case, it was even pretty obvious, but no hardware wallets were used, no multisigs, and of course, like in case they should have some sort of, as we were saying, on-chain safeguards, maybe some of these withdrawals could have been prevented. Another one was the Horizon bridge. The Horizon bridge was a bridge used for the Harmony protocol in order to bridge assets, of course, from Ethereum and Binance Chain to their own sidechain. And this was basically built on top of a network, not a network, but a multisig of validators with a scheme like 2 out of 5. And basically what happened here was that even though there were no cryptographic issues, the keys were simply stolen, and again, happened again. Close to 100 million were lost. At the end of the day, the keys in this case were actually exposed. There were no anomaly detections here. Again, something like safeguards could have prevented this from happening. And probably this is one of the biggest that I remember, not sure if you do, but the running bridge was the bridge that was basically used by Xfinity to bridge assets from Ethereum, mainly USDC and ETH. The running bridge was basically built on top of a network of validators with 5 out of 9 signatures. And what happened here was that basically 4 of them were held by the same company, and one of the other ones were temporarily delegated to this same company. That permission was never revoked, and basically the attacker only had to take control of one guy or one company in order to make whatever he wanted to do. This was probably a bit more sophisticated attack, probably social engineering again, but at the end of the day, keys got compromised, around more than 600 million loss. It was huge. Again, like no anomaly detections. Basically, they didn't understood what was going on until like a few days later. So it was kind of crazy. No on-chain safeguards, keys ended up being exposed, and the same thing happened again. We can continue discussing like more about this, more and more hacks, but that's not the idea. I would love to push a little bit for this standard that I think many other projects in this space could try to follow. Again, trustless execution is one of the core concepts that we apply at Mimic. I'm not saying like these projects using Mimic could have avoided this, but maybe following the same best practices or the same concepts could be a good fit. To give you just a little short description why we use it and what it's Mimic for. Mimic is an abstraction layer for builders to build on top of blockchain. And the idea is to abstract them from the low-level complexity. So at some point, the idea is that they can sign once and execute multiple times. So trustless execution, it's a core concept for us. Let's revisit one more time what we said at the beginning. When I say about trustless execution, I mean allowing anyone to execute the code on our behalf. Is it possible to make it permissionless? Can we avoid like having an only owner in our contracts or something like that? Is it possible to sign once and execute multiple times? So we don't have to be like, imagine sometimes plugging a multi-sig with a hardware wallet might not be scalable. So this is extremely important. And again, having some sort of on-chain safeguards, this kind of ultimate layer of security that could be ensured on-chain. So how does it work? Let me explain a little bit how does it work for us. Again, just to share the idea, it's not I'm not saying that the same pattern must be followed this way for other projects, but maybe there is a way similar that they could follow to implement something like this. So in our case, the developer basically implements what we call a task. The task is going to be translated, and this is the layer of abstraction that I was saying before. This is just Mimic. But the task itself is just a program that will be translated into, it will be executed by the relayers. The relayers will produce some output. This output will be validated by the validators network. And this will produce intents, which will be ended up being fulfilled by solvers. And finally, this will be translated into transactions. Not gonna get into the box underneath too much. But the good thing is the developer is basically providing some code. We can think about this as simply as a function. But not only that, they're also signing what we call the configuration. This is like the input for the function. So with those two, in a deterministic way, we can be sure if the relayers are doing the job correctly or not. This is the job for the validators. And moreover, the developers can define some sort of on-chain safeguards. So let's see a quick example of what do I mean with this. A classic example that we've been dealing a lot with Mimic is people trying to convert like many different assets. When I say many different, I'm saying like thousands or like in different layers, like 10 or 20 chains. And this is clearly impossible for a treasury manager to handle this with a multi-sig, even though if they want to do it in a secure way. So how do they do that? So basically they can implement a task. This task basically says what they want to do. They want to fetch, I don't know, assets from different oracles to know what are the ones that they have some balance from. They want to swap it against USDC, whatever. Then the input itself, the signature that they provide is, okay, which are the chains, for example, that they want to execute this, or that they want to allow to execute this, which is the slippage that they are okay with, which is the oracles that you want to read prices from, etc. And finally, they can put some sort of safeguard in the blockchain itself, saying, okay, the only recipient address that you can withdraw funds to is someone, I don't know. And the only token that you can withdraw is USDC. So what happens here is basically, we've been always asking to ourselves this hard question. What is the worst thing that can happen even if our keys are stolen? Well, in this case, as we were saying before, even if the protocol behaves maliciously, which is the worst thing that could happen? Maybe they can try to execute not actually a bad swap. Maybe they can use the maximum slippage that the users agreed for. Maybe they will only be allowed to swap tokens against USDC. And ultimately, the ultimate thing that they could do is only to withdraw USDC funds to this guy. That's it. Even if the network works maliciously, there's nothing too bad that can go wrong. So, in the cases that we've mentioned before, we've been seeing like this evolution, let's say. First with Wintermute, we've seen just an EOA plugged in. Then we saw like a multisig of validators. Then we saw the network of validators. What I'm saying is maybe that's not enough. It's a good progress, but I think it's not enough. And I think that there are many different things that we can do. But it's a concept that I think many different projects should stress a little bit more. And probably there are so many other ideas. For example, these are some of the ones that we follow internally, like having some sort of time locks or challenge periods. Like if there's something weird going on, it's not just straightforward to like break the system entirely. Well, of course, also anomalies detection, like monitoring tools, all of that should happen. I didn't mention it before, but in many of these cases about the hacks that I mentioned before, they were not aware of what was going wrong. Like it took up like a couple of days maybe for some of them to actually be aware of that those funds were not anymore there. So that's even. But again, yeah. So the idea would be to push for a standard. I'll be happy to have your ideas on this off stage if you wanna join a discussion, and you can read more about this. Again, there are many different concepts that for us are very much important because of the things we do. It's extremely important to us to find a way of making trustless execution possible. This hard question of what are the things that can go wrong, even if our keys are exposed, I think it's something that everyone should be asking to ourselves. You can read more about this in our docs or white paper or whatever. And again, well, thank you. Thank you for listening to the talk. Hope you enjoy it. Do we have time for questions?
Thank you, Facu. Yeah, we have some time. So, yeah. Decentralization only matters, doesn't matter until it does, right? That was the quote. Yeah, I want that on a tattoo.
From Mariano. Yeah.
That was good. Yeah, Mariano Conti. Yeah. Any questions from the audience? Yeah, in the back.
You have to really trust a single, like a particular person. Like your protocol won't work if you can't really put your whole trust on it. Like decentralization would work for your protocol. So how do you handle those cases where maybe for now you don't know how to implement a mechanism that will be trustless, but you just have to use maybe your EOA or your private key? So how do we handle that situation?
What was the situation? Can you describe again? Sorry.
Like maybe you have a smart contract that you have to, maybe you have a smart contract that receives, that you have to validate that, okay, this person won or this person did not win. Maybe you cannot implement ZK proofs or marker or fault proofs or any, like those complex mechanisms. You just want to use your own private key to be sending the message to a smart contract. Are you compromising decentralization? I don't know how to put it, but there are situations where we can't really be decentralized. How do you handle those situations?
It's hard to say. I'm not sure if what you're thinking of, but I mean, probably maybe there is a way to decentralize everything, but I think it should be stressed a little bit more. I'm curious, which is exactly the case that you think that something that cannot be decentralized, or why having a private key only send transactions is the only way around?
Yeah, I don't know, but like I feel like there are situations where you really have to trust one party when he has to do it, even though the funds are so many. So I don't know, maybe you be more careful on the Web2 side, but decentralization might not really be possible.
Even though I think, for example, in the case of Wintermute that I mentioned at the beginning, they were a market-making company, so maybe they won't have like, maybe it doesn't make sense to have a network of validators in that case, but at least, I don't know, a multi-sig, something like that should be possible. I mean, why having a single key is the only way around?
Okay, then I understand.
All right, we have another question in the back.
Do you have an idea what kinds of standards would be useful?
No. Do you? No, but this is something I haven't seen this concept. Not sure if someone else has seen something like this, or I'm actually not even sure if the trustless execution concept is something going on in this space. But I remember since the beginning that we started working on this. It was crucial for us not to have custody of our users' funds, so we stressed it a lot. And we're always asking the question, okay, every time we implement a new feature, it's like, what if everything goes wrong? Like, someone steals the keys, like, what's the worst that can happen? Our answer is, the worst thing that can happen is halting the system, but not withdrawing money from it. I think it's something that many other projects in this space should be asking to ourselves.
Thank you for the session. You just mentioned that it's possible to halt the system, but we're trying to push for something decentralized. That sounds like a chain halt, like what maybe Solana could do or something.
I mean, halt temporarily. I mean, the private keys is still there. What's the worst thing that can happen in our case, I'm saying, yeah? Mm-hmm. For example, from our side, if the solvers wants to act maliciously, the worst thing that can happen is that the transactions don't get mined. But at some point, the user can withdraw, I mean, the user himself can withdraw the money because the user's private key was never exposed. If ours is exposed, then we cannot produce more intents in order to process the task that the user wanted to. But the user, of course, they can withdraw their funds. That's what I mean. I mean, it might, if our keys are stolen, we are halting the system, our system, but not users' funds.
I see. A quick follow-up question. So does Mimic get to control the relayers, verifiers, and the solvers? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks for the great questions. Thank you, Facu, for your talk. We need to move on to the next one. So another round of applause, please.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Antonina Noroir from M0 Protocol.